Just talk briefly about the Illinois game, and obviously pleased with the opportunity to be 10-0. The champions for the offensive side were Corey Lindsley and Jack Mewhort are playing just really well for us. Tight end is Jeff Hireman, and once again is playing fantastic, and Evan Spencer, Philly Brown at receivers. We had co-offense players of the week, and it was Carlos Hyde. The obvious was 10.2 yards per carry, 6 big plays, 5 touchdowns. And then the other guy, which is just great to see this, Andrew Norwell, grade out 88%, extremely high, and once again playing at a very, very high level. On defense, you had Ryan Shazier and Noah Spence and C.J. Barnett were all 3 D players of the week. Mike Bennett and Joey Bosa. Joey Bosa had a little neck injury, and but when he was in there was extremely disruptive with 2 sacks and 2 pressures. Special teams. Our punter did an excellent job in the kicking game, and the black shirt goes to Ron Tanner. That's special teams player of the week. 4 tackles on kickoff, great effort and kickoff return, and very productive player. This week is all about 18 seniors that have their last 2 years have been on a nice run, and guys that I have great admiration for. Didn't know him very well, obviously, for a while, and now we all know him very well. So I think Buckeye Nation is going to do a great job of sending off these guys in their last home game with a chance to do some really historic things, but most importantly, just win this game. Our effort this week is we're beat up a little bit. Right now, we're just going through it, and the reason it's showing up in our coverage units a little bit, and that's I want to say we're down 9 players are out for the season, scholarship players, and of those 7 or 8 of them were guys we were all counting on from the Griffins. Adam Griffin, Jamie Wood, Blake Thomas, Jamie Thompson, James Clark, Christian Bryant, Mike Hill, Underwood, and Munger. Those are all guys that are out for the entire year. And then we've had these other ones that are Curtis Grant, Jordan Hall, Darren Lee, Josh Perry, Jack Mewhort, Bosa, Tommy Shutt, and Adolphus Washington have been in and out of the lineup, which has really caused us certainly some issues on defense last week when you're down on. We had to put a guy at Mike linebacker. Cam Williams never played Mike linebacker for us. He's always been an outside guy. And then Joe Berger, who's a walk-on from Cincinnati, second year in the program, was playing for us. So obviously we got to improve, but that's our focus this week is on getting some players back. The problem is I'm not sure how many of those guys we're going to get back, and preparing some of the younger guys to either play or play a little better. So with that said, I'll certainly answer any questions for you.
Front row left, Rusty.
You already touched on this a little bit, Urban, but you mentioned doing some really historic things. Obviously, the streak this week is at hand. Is that something that you might put a little emphasis on? Doing something nobody's ever done?
Oh, we talked about it. I mean, emphasis, no. I think emphasis is on just what I spoke of. There's some guys, there's Warren Balls. They're running down, doing things that really they haven't done. A lot of them in their careers. We're asking some offensive players to tackle right now, and you saw what happens when you do that. So our emphasis is on teaching some of those guys how to tackle. We have five offensive players on punt right now. Never had that. Punt is you go down and tackle. And when guys have never tackled in their career, that's bad coaching by us. So we're spending time, either you try to create some defensive players or which doesn't usually work this time of year, or you just teach and get better. So our focus is on that.
Completely unrelated thing. This is the last year for the BCS. Having been a coach throughout the BCS, the history of the BCS anyway. What do you think of it? How do you think people will look back on it? Has this been the best way to decide who plays for the national championship?
Without spending much time on it, because it's not fair to our team for me to spend much time on it, but I will say this, that I think it's a flawed system, but when you logically think about it, what the BCS people have done, which obviously we're all part of it, I think it was great for a while. I think you took an imperfect system and did the best you can without forcing a playoff. Now I imagine this, but there's going to be controversy in playoffs too now. There's not a 64 team playoff, so you're going to have 4 guys. What's that 5th team going to feel like? So.
Middle, Dave.
Coach, what's different about Carlos Hyde this year? Obviously he was very good last year, but he seems to be taking things to another level this year.
Completely different. First is he's more mature. He's a little bit, and I love Carlos, but he's immature when we couple years ago, like very immature. He handles his business. He's 230 as opposed to 240 and some change. He's much faster. Longest run last year, someone said it was 20. I can't remember, went over 8. But just kidding. But he is. He's got the acceleration now, and he's playing very aggressive too. And plus the chemistry between the offense line and him, and it's really neat to watch.
Joey Bosa, are you confident you'll get him back for the
Pretty
Indiana
confident.
game,
Yeah, it's nothing structural. It's a sore neck, and he's a tough hombre. He's a guy that's. I don't worry about Joey Bosa. I just think everybody's gonna know that name by the time he leaves here. That's how good I think he's gonna be.
Third row right. David?
Coach, the win streak obviously very impressive. How do you balance it with your team though, between telling them appreciate it, but also don't take winning for granted?
Well, that's great. That's absolutely true. You know, we had victory meal last night, and that's the 22nd time they got to go eat victory meal. So those are all. But once again, we're going to really do a good job this week about focusing on teaching Warren Ball how to tackle and Ezekiel Elliott how to tackle, because they're on coverage units in Jordan Hall. So we mentioned it as of now. We might have another chat about 8 o'clock on Saturday night if we play well. But up until that point, we're all business and try to get. You know, we got some issues we have to take care of. Every team's dealing with those issues right now. You know, the injuries and just making it right, and that's our job. I like the folk. I mean, we had an excellent team meeting yesterday, and there was nothing other than conversation about congratulations, great job. You know, you ran for 441. I think that number 2 for Illinois. I just watched it Sunday night again, and I think he is a great football player, and he made plays with guys hitting him right in the face. And so we got to get better in certain areas, but we also appreciate where we're at. That's the biggest thing. I think appreciation where we're at and move forward.
Urban, with the way that both Carlos and Braxton are running the ball now, how do you see defenses playing you guys in the read portion of the run game in trying to pick how to
That's a problem. That's a problem whenever you have, and the guys blocking right now, you have Evans, Spencer, and Hireman are blocking the perimeter as well as I can ever remember, and same with Philly Brown. And those are a lot of times you see a guy, a big 230-pound back, hitting the second level of a defense untouched. It's because, all due respect to Carlos and Braxton, the guys blocking for him are really, really good right now. So it's difficult to defend, and that's where it's enjoyable to game plan when you have weapons and guys check. You call them checkers when you like the size and speed of your checkers. It's pretty cool in there to draw those little circles on the wall. It's a little uncomfortable to draw the circles when the circles are real small and slow. But the bigger the circle and the faster the circle, that's fun stuff.
How has Braxton developed in that part of it in terms of making the right reads on those?
Oh, good. I mean, last year was a hit and miss. That's a great question. Last year he was probably, I mean, I'm being hard on him, but he was probably half-half. And when you guess, you're half-halved. When you actually go through the proper mechanics of the reads, which a lot of those, even the ones Carlos are coming out the other end, I want to say 75% of the time he's reading a defender, and he's on it. And his work ethic, and I think him and Kenny both, the impact Kenny Guyton's made on this program and on Braxton Miller is absolute. What's the right word? Just profound. I mean, it's profound what he's done. As far as, because he's an excellent prepare guy. He's the guy that really studies the game as a nut about his fundamentals, and as a result, every other quarterback sees that, and that's really helped Braxton.
Fourth row left, Rob. Urban.
Two-parter. There's almost this escalation of the mentality or attitude that if you don't play for the national championship, it's like a failure of the season. What do you think of that? Has that changed since you came into coaching? And on the flip side, number 2 is, in Buckeye Nation, it's almost moving away from that. There's a segment that's so worried about being embarrassed in a national championship game, a lot of scar tissue there, that they almost rather not do that. What would you say to that side of it?
Well, Ezekiel, that's on our punt team, and I got to teach him how to tackle. And Warren Ball is running down on kickoff, and he's the number 2 guy in the boundary. And when you run a boundary return, his job is to spill the lead blocker, and he's not done a lot of that in his high school career. So we're going to work really, really hard on that this week in practice. Already have. Any other questions about Warren Ball's coverage?
None.
Far left, Matt.
the depth concern, and you mentioned that, you know, every team's going through this, but is this typical for teams you've had to be this thin at this time? And secondly, do you have redshirt decisions even at this stage that you go through because of what you're going through?
Probably made some errors in you know, you have Gary and Conley, you have Eli Apple, and you have Jamie Thompson got hurt. But those are the bodies that you normally have. And then the same with Mike Mitchell. Trey Johnson hasn't played a lot. He's been fighting injuries all fall. Those are the areas, those are the 200, you know, the defensive skill guys that at the end of the day, probably they just weren't ready yet. And you'd hate that at the end of the year, and we've done it, everybody's done it. You know, all of a sudden at the end of the year, he plays 37 plays. Was that really worth it? And if we have confidence with a lot of these young players, you just watch them, there's potential for really good careers. So was it a tactical error? Maybe, you know, especially when you start dealing with some injuries like we're dealing with now. But you have, you know, however many games left. But the games left are really, really important. So the question you asked is probably a conversation comes up every 2 hours as we're in here working in rooms. And I'll start penciling through depth charts. And we traveled, I want to say 4 walk-ons that never played, you know, to Illinois, because if something happens, they're going to the game. And that occupies a lot of our time right now. At the end of the day, we probably could have played a couple guys more, but it's hindsight, so we got to move on.
Front row right, Austin.
Urban, with the way that the schedule sets up for guys who would have to declare early for the draft, are there already conversations? Do you have to address that even at this point in the year for somebody like Shazier or Braxton?
I was going to give you the Warren Ball answer, but that's probably not fair because that's real. I mean, that's all due respect. Your question is real too, but at some point, I can't remember that. It's after the season, right up between the bowl game and end of the season, and I've sat in a lot of those meetings, and we'll probably have a couple this year, but not yet.
Not yet. No. Would you think that Braxton would be best suited for one more year?
Back row, Clay.
This is not too far off the beaten path. An Ohio team leads every division of college football on win streak. You're at 22, Ohio Dominican at 15, Mount Union's at 20-something. As a native of Ohio, I mean, what does that say to you? Is it the coaching? Is it the talent? Is it just make you proud?
It does. I'm an Ohioan. I love Ohio, and I didn't realize that about the other 2 schools because you live in a little cubby hole and drive to work and sit in dark rooms all day long. So that's great for those 2 schools. Well, you said Ohio Dominican?
Right.
That's outstanding. No, I didn't know that.
Front row, Tim.
Yeah, a couple, Urban. Number one, are you sitting there a little bit stunned that you guys have a shot at breaking the school record for most wins in a row based on what you took over late in 2011? Just how surprised are you to be at this point with this group?
You know, Tim, I haven't really thought about it much. When I look at the names, and we were doing it today, getting ready for senior day, and you just kind of look at the transitions of some of these, you know, I look at Marcus Hall, and that's to think that those guys have developed into, you know, I mean, I go fight for those guys. I got to be careful I say because it's headlines somewhere, but I'd take that offensive line anywhere against anybody. I love who they are. I've loved who they become. If I was a college kid, that's who I'd hang out with because they're sincere, they're great people that work their tails off, and they love Ohio State and love football. So, you know, I think someday you'll be able to look back and reflect. Now is not that time. We have too much work to do, but I think it's an honor when you start thinking about we did it. We have a team meeting, and I leave all this stuff up here for a reason. We could have changed this team meeting room any way we want, and you can just see, look at the, you know, we're talking about 1916 is the first championship won at Ohio State. A lot of great football teams, and to have our name even in that breath is pretty, almost as overwhelming if you spend too much time on it. When we spent, I think, 30 seconds on it, moved on, and start working on Warren Ball.
The other thing, and speaking
Poor
of that,
Warren.
and Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah, Zeke's going to get it too.
And speaking of that streak or whatever, I mean, last year you guys are comfortably ahead at Indiana. Then it's 52-49, and you look like you'd been shot at a few times when you walked in the interview room afterwards and stuff. And what's the reinforcement? What are you telling your guys this week? Obviously, this team you're playing got blitzed last week, and So what's the message?
Well, the concern I had with Illinois is you're talking about also the leading passing team in the Big Ten Conference, and we jump out, I want to say it's 28 zip or something like that, and they start throwing it around. That kid's running around. Next thing you know, they return a punt. I pulled Jack Meyer out, probably not the right thing to do at the right time, and then all of a sudden, you're in a storm, somewhat of a storm. And then this one, I would anticipate that they move the ball. Last week it was, I'm not sure the weather, but it was they just kept dropping the ball. You watch the rivalry against our rivals, and it was all over the place now. I think they scored 48 points. So this team can score points in bunches. We got to control the clock, control the time. They scored a good amount of points on Michigan State, the #1 defense I think might be in the country. So, I can, on a national scale, which we're not worried about that, but we're going to beat this team. But wait a minute now. That's a very good team, very good players, well coached. And so we have to really focus this week on facing a very potent offense.
Did you leave, let me follow quick though. They got back into it, throwing the ball big time. That's the way Illinois did. Did you leave Saturday? You win by 25, but was it a pit in your stomach? Explain what you felt like about your past.
A little bit, and then I've been there before, and so I made sure they enjoy it. My job is to coach these players and not worry about anything else. And I graded myself a C last week. I was too worried about too much other things, and I can promise you we're going to coach better this week. And the guys need to enjoy a Division I win, and that's our job. And we certainly did. Now that doesn't mean today or tomorrow and Wednesday we're not going to go get after it, because we are. But I can assure you, yesterday I made sure that the staff and players enjoyed that win.
Two more questions. Phil?
Do you feel like you guys are peaking right now? Do you feel good about the trajectory of your team?
Offensively, I do. We got to get guys back. Josh Perry and Curtis Grant, we have to get them back. We have to, or we get a problem. And so that's our focus, getting better. I don't feel like we did as special teams. I thought up to that point our coverage units were the best in America. The way they performed Saturday was not. Our punter did, the blessing is a punter can hammer a ball. The negative is he outkicked your coverage by 20 yards. I mean, a 70-yard punt and a 67-yard punt. And we have some fast guys on there that when it gets to the second level, and those are the guys that don't tackle. So we're really working on that. So I think we got to get right back at it. And a lot of that to do with the personnel issues we're dealing with.
Could you address whether you think Curtis and Josh?
Josh looks probable, and Curtis is, 50-50, whatever that means. So we're hoping. Questionable.
Last question, Lori?
Coach, I know that last year there was a lot of discussion about Michigan State being a turning point game for you guys. But when you look at the Indiana game, if you include that, the 5 BCS opponents you'd faced up until then were scoring like 30 points a game. And after that, they were scoring more along the lines of 20 points a game. Was the Hoosiers game last year in any way a turning point for you guys?
That's really one of the first times I've ever seen our guys have an effort problem here. And that was not a comfortable Sunday when we all came back in here. Because you can make mistakes. People make mistakes in football all the time. Matter of fact, you make probably more mistakes than you make great plays. But the lack of effort is something that's just not tolerated. And that's the only time really since that I can remember that I pushed plans like, wait a minute, that guy's not trying. What's the problem here? Let's get that fixed. And fortunately, we got it fixed.
Haven't seen that ever since?
I mean, not as a unit. I saw this guy or that guy, but not as a group. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Coach.